Welcome to Appreciation Review Critique, where I take a game and give my honest opinion about it. At the same time, I admire it to give the developer team full credit for their creation. Today's game, we're going to be checking out Dead Space, released October 14th, 2008. Couldn't have released at a better time, as Halloween was just around the corner. The game is a third-person shooter with survival horror elements similar to that of Resident Evil, but I'll get to that later. 2008, one of the golden years for video games. We got releases like Call of Duty World at War, Fallout 3, GTA 4, Left 4 Dead, Metal Gear Solid 4, Super Smash Bros, Mario Kart Wii, and Wii Ski. Clearly, there would be some huge competition for visceral, vaginal, however you want to pronounce it, the dev team, to nab some of the gaming market for their own. So before we start, I want to talk about an interesting concept that was done with this game disc. We all know about demos, right? I don't know if the 360 version had this, but before you start playing, the game has 3 different options to choose from on the main PS3 UI. There's the game itself, but right below it are 2 demos embedded with the disc. One for Battlefield Bad Company and the other for Burnout Paradise, both IPs belonging to our beloved publisher EA. Burnout starts you off with a hype trailer. Funny enough, as of the making of this video, they have released a remastered version for current gen consoles. It plays well and I really enjoy its destructive physics. They are almost satisfying in a way. As for the Battlefield Bad Company demo, they give you a decent intro and all the info you need before they let you run free.
They could have thrown me in jail for what I did, but instead, they transferred me here. This is my story.
What do I think of the demo?
Not quite time to kick back yet, though. The trucks you spot.
It's awesome! I'm definitely making a video on this game sometime in the future. Now let's get to the real meat of this video. We can move on to Dead Space. What is it? Well, as I mentioned before, it's a third-person survival horror, set in, well, space, believe it or not. With a title like this, I don't know why I would expect it to be anywhere else. Gameplay... It feels very familiar, as if I played it before. What do I mean by that? Okay, so it was obvious. As you play through it, you begin to detect elements inspired by other games. To me, it was like a mixture of BioShock, Resident Evil, and Batman Arkham Asylum, despite that game, releasing a year after. BioShock, which was released 1 year prior to Dead Space, shares aspects such as its setting. You are isolated away from everyone else in space, similar to how you are alone underwater in BioShock. As the player traverses the ship, fixing every possible problem that arises.
We have to get that thing off the ship. The chemicals you need are in the chemistry lab.
We need to take him out while we can still breathe.
You use the tram system as a transport device to move about level to level, as you do in subaquatic environments of Rapture. Components like horror and item management were integrated from Resident Evil to this game. You start the game off with limited item slots, and as you explore the ship, you'll find upgrades and schematics for your suit that'll improve the amount of items you can carry, as well as make you look more badass, and who wouldn't want that? Having played a lot of Resident Evil games, it was very clear to me that this game was trying to replicate the success of that series, but that's not a bad thing. To me, as long as a game is inspired by previous titles and implements mechanics to newer IPs, just allows the game industry to evolve and create amazing new experiences for us. We have a variety of weapons to choose from to fight the space undead that vary in use depending on the enemy that you face. Basic enemies, for example, could use the typical plasma cutter that you begin the game with because it's not strong, but it does make up for it in the amount of ammo that you're allowed to carry for it. My favorite weapon is the line gun. It's the exact opposite to the plasma cutter. It's strong as fuck, but lacks the ammo capacity. I mainly like to use this one because most enemies get taken care of in just a couple of hits due to its damage output. It definitely makes you feel powerful, so they did a great job there. Weapons that give you a satisfying feeling are amazing, and it did succeed at its job. Flamethrowers are another needed weapon, mostly for the fact that you encounter spider-like foes that are much harder to take down with any other weapon because there are so many clustered together. It allows you to live the traumatic fantasy of burning those 8-legged creatures back to the depths of the underworld from which they came from. Just kidding, spiders are cool. Honestly, spiders can help control flies, mosquitoes, moths, beetles, and wasps and other insects, keeping this population down. This helps protect you from being bitten or stung while you're working in your garden, as if gamers actually garden. You also have the means of using telekinesis and stasis abilities. I found the telekinesis to be somewhat useless, as you only really use it for small segments in the game that require you to move an obstacle out of your way or in your way, depending on the situation. There hasn't been a part where I've used it in combat, so it didn't really feel like much fun to me. Stasis, on the other hand, is awesome and more useful. Enemies in the game are fast, so you can use stasis to slow them down, giving you a chance to attack them without feeling overwhelmed by a horde of zombies or a huge intimidating enemy. Also works to slow obstacles down to allow you to traverse the environment without dying. Being set in space, of course, there has to be an oxygen mechanic. Every time they put you in a room without oxygen, you have a timer on your back that counts down till you run out. You can increase the timer by upgrading your suit whenever you encounter benches, as long as you have enough nodes to upgrade. You can also increase your health by doing so. Having to worry about oxygen is kinda too much to keep track of at first, until you upgrade. Occasionally, I'd find myself trying to look for zombies around me so I don't get ganged up on, because you don't know when or where they are, while also freaking out because I'm about to run out of air and I can't stop and use one of my oxygen containers from my inventory because I'll get gangbanged by the zombies chasing me. I can see what they were trying to do with this mechanic, but it just gives me anxiety. Luckily, these situations are far and few between, so that's not too much of an issue. Sound design. Music and sound design was great. Average but great. It accomplished what it set out to do, which was scaring the living soul out of us. A couple things stood out to me about the music. To begin with was the fact that it gave me anxiety. Every time you had an encounter with the undead, alarming music would play, similar to how they do in movies right before a generic ass jump scare. Whenever the music would play, I'd always look around frantically because I'd have no idea where the zombies were or how many, so I didn't want to start shooting at one guy because then I'd have another attacking me from behind. But that's where the game does good and accomplishes what it set out to be, which is, a horror game. Definitely enjoy the sounds in the sections where you'd be required to pay attention to your oxygen, like space and the rooms with lack of gravity, for example. They truly made it seem as if you were in space. Everything is silent except for the certain things, but being silent also left you vulnerable to attacks from zombies, as they also did not include any music when they appeared. It actually made it less scary, which was a good break from the madness. Almost made you feel as if you weren't trapped on a broken ass ship infested with zombies. Speaking of zombie-infested ship, as you walk around in the areas that don't have enemies to fight, they made it feel very eerie and horrifying. You sometimes find yourself walking through an empty corridor, terrified of what's around the corner because of the sounds coming from within the walls. As the player walks around, you begin to hear noises from behind, as if something or someone bumped into an object, making you believe there is an enemy nearby, making you feel as if you're not alone.
Your persistence surprises me. Holding on to your final breath, you saw your way home. Say your prayers.
And increasing the panic level the player feels once a zombie actually does appear. I thought that aspect was really cool and it kept me on my toes every second. Presentation. Graphics are great, definitely. It conducts the scary, horrific environment originally envisioned by our developer team. But in this department, it does begin to show its age. Like, you can tell it's an early PS3 game when game textures look like this. At this point in time, games were just starting to look really good, but in some aspects also look like a higher end PS2 game. Early PS3 games have that aesthetic that makes them look like a hybrid of a PS2 and PS3 game. In that regard, the game looks amazing for its time. Now when I play it, it amazes me as to what was accomplished visually in different areas of the game. The dev team did an especially amazing job with this. Sure, the frame rate drops occasionally, but it's not bad or game breaking. It's there and does pop up at you like a pimple on someone's face, but you still try to be polite and pretend like you don't notice it. I feel the same way about the elevators in this game. Every time you go on a ride to a different floor, it feels like forever. I'm aware that this was a classic way to hide the loading screen, but sometimes it does feel like it goes on for a little too long. But in today's day and age, it's just an excuse to pull out and be on your phone. Enemy animations are frightening at first, but as you continue playing the game, you just get used to it. Being used to it doesn't make it less scary, especially with enemies that haul ass at you faster than you can run. Their creep factor is highlighted when they run. I almost feel like a deer in headlights, especially when I have yet to reload my weapon at the same time. Their erratic behavior just reminds me of the dang crackheads you find in downtown Seattle. In all seriousness, Dead Space is a great game. It does execute horror and dread from walking through an isolated spaceship with little to no clue of what the hell is even happening at first. It's a game from the generation where you didn't have to sit waiting for hours while a 40GB update downloads or for a game to install. You can just insert the game and start playing right away. The classic method of play. If you are looking for a scary game to play or just trying to find a good PS3 title, honestly just pick this up at a local game store. That is if GameStop has not gone out of business yet. Or just find a retro game store. I'm sure they'll have it there. Oh, and one more thing. What was that? Hold on, guys.